To our Sales Showdown Debate of the Ages, hosted by PandaDoc. I'm your host, Travis Tyler, and with me today are three amazing, wonderful, fantastic. I'm trying to go for that Lady Gaga meme where it's like amazing, fantastic, wonderful, stupendous. All
Yeah.
three of you are people I respect, I look up to. When you post, I stop my scroll, I listen because you have so much to teach me, the silly guy that dances in a panda suit every once in a while. So, without further ado, I'll introduce our three speakers. We have Florin. Florin, thanks for joining us today. Can you give us a little synopsis about you and the work you do, and then we'll jump to the other speakers after that?
Yeah, 100%. Thanks, Travis, and super excited to be here. So, name is Florin, currently the director of sales at a company called Barley, which is in the HR tech compensation space, but really built my career as a SDR and leading SDR and BDR teams at a few different companies, and started my own little side gig where I do a ton of workshops for different teams and companies and helping their BDR teams with prospecting specifically. And now getting more into content. So LinkedIn, my newsletter, and yeah, just super excited to be here.
For those who are just tuning in now, this is Sales Showdown Debate of the Ages brought to you by PandaDoc. Please give our speakers a connection request, follow them, jump onto their newsletters, whether it's over at Casted, and we'll introduce Lindsay in a second, or it's Florin's newsletter. I have been following all of these three speakers for a long time. And Florin, especially, I've been like just a big admirer of your work. So thanks for joining us. Next up, Lindsay from Casted. Lindsay, please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you and the work you're doing.
That's good. I am Lindsay Chepkema. I am a marketing leader turned CEO and founder of a startup that now serves marketing leaders. So I'll be kind of taking the voice of CEO, probably in some instances, and marketer and others, kind of wearing two hats today. But Casted, we are a podcast and video platform specifically for B2B marketing teams. So I'm excited to do this thing.
Right on. We're excited to have you. Big fans of you, Lindsay. And I know we've partnered on a little bit of content in the past. We're going to do more. So thanks so much for joining us. And yes, we need to hear from those who are getting some outreach, hitting their inboxes and phones. So it'll be great to have your perspective here of what works and maybe what doesn't work on you. Reed Anderson, the Panda OG. Welcome to the Sales Showdown Debate of the Ages. Reed, tell us a little bit about your history working at PandaDoc and where you feel like you specialize as well.
Yeah, thanks, Travis. So yeah, I guess I'm the OG now. I've been at PandaDoc on the sales side as an account executive for, I just hit my 7-year mark. So that was a big milestone. Yeah, lucky 7. And yeah, I mean, I started as an SDR here and then worked my way up to our enterprise segment. So hopefully we'll be able to provide some insight from that perspective for some of these questions we got.
Fantastic. Reed, you've been super helpful in the content I've produced, from ebooks, from podcast episodes, interviewing on e-signature myths and laws. We've had a lot of fun together over the years, man. So thanks for joining us. And let's dive into this Sales Showdown Debate of the Ages, where we're not just going to have every panelist on here agree with the others. We want to hear some different perspectives and opinions. So we're doing around the horn ESPN style. I'm going to ask some questions. We're going to start easy with topics you hear talked about all the time. But it's always good to get fresh perspectives as we're ending the year of 2023. So without further ado, our first question I will throw to the panelists is, can cold calling still be an effective sales strategy in today's digital age? I'll give my contestants and panelists a minute to think about their responses with a quote I saw from somebody on LinkedIn today who said, "Please stop saying blank is dead." Those are the most annoying LinkedIn posts. And a lot of times people say cold calling is dead. I myself have bought things from a cold call, but I would love to hear from everyone on this call. And I'll start in the same order I introduced everybody, which is, Florin, can cold calling still be an effective sales strategy in today's digital age?
It's pretty funny because literally this morning I did a cold call and I booked a meeting. So I think that's going to give you my answer right there. But if I was to give you a more eloquent answer, so 100%, it still works. Like, I've had a ton of different teams that have used it successfully. I still use it successfully to this day. But the one thing I'll say that the tactic itself doesn't work in isolation. I think it's important that you have a multi-channel approach where you're doing like LinkedIn, emails, cold calling, and meeting your buyers where they're at and where they want to engage with people. I also think it is one of the highest ROI things you can do, in the sense that having a conversation with somebody live, being able to understand their perspective, their tone, their objections, and having that conversation is super important. And I think a lot of people that say it doesn't work over index on their own experiences. They're like, oh, it doesn't work because I don't take cold calls. But I can give you an example. Like my CEO picks up every cold call. I don't know why he does it. He just enjoys it. Like literally every day. So I think it just depends on person to person. I know it's not something that a lot of people like, but the results kind of speak for themselves.
I like it. Going to call out a comment I see on the LinkedIn Live right now, which is from Shane Ryan. Only if you get their cell phones, better cold call than cold email. Interesting take there, Shane. Florin, while you wrap up your answer, what do you think of Shane? Do you think, I liked what you said, though. It's over-indexing on your own experiences. I've never heard that phrase like that before. That's a really nice way of putting it. But I almost feel like you answered, Shane, when you said, like, it needs to be done in tandem with other efforts. So not just cold email, not just cold call, but doing them together and other cold outreach as well. Is there anything else you want to add there?
I think I would agree with Shane. Like, I don't really think that calling through the corporate tree lines like works anymore, especially because so many people are remote. I definitely would only call people that have their cell phones there, or like a direct line.
I like it. All right, Shane, thanks for contributing that. And Troy Barter, good to see you in the house, my man. Old former director of sales here at PandaDoc. Good to see you, bud. Lindsay, I will pose the question to you. And I know I said, like, don't agree with everyone, but man, when people make such articulate responses, it's like, dang, how can you not agree with a guy as smooth as Florin? But can cold calling still be an effective sales strategy in today's digital age?
Answer is, in short, since you said, can it be, not is it always, can it be? Sure. I disagree that better cold call than cold email. I have seen, I guess maybe this is over indexing on my own experiences, but I've seen a lot of success with cold email, because you get a chance to, I guess, say a little bit more before someone hangs up on you and like, hey, do you have a minute? Right. That said, I'm going to give another kind of typical marketing answer is it depends. So it depends on who you are reaching out to. Salespeople, my husband is in sales, and he always takes cold calls, and he's always nice. And he's like, hey, I'm not your person. You might want to talk to this person. Or like, I like how you got my attention. Like he gives feedback. I don't answer. I just don't. So there you go. So we're trying to reach a CEO of a tech startup. For me, I don't ever answer. Trying to reach sales, and it sounds like your boss always answers. That might be a good shot. Is to be like, hey, do you have a second? I'd love to talk with you. But I think something else that I think is really, really important that you touched on is it's an immersive experience. It's not, no one thing is going to work. And I think we all know that, but the cold calls that work for our team and that I've seen work for past teams at other companies work because of the other touch points. Somebody comes to this situation, and then one of our teams reaches out completely unrelated, and they're like, oh my gosh, I saw so-and-so on that sales, throwdown, and so on and so forth. You have to have an immersive experience. It's all about brand building. Of course, the marketer would say that, but it's important. Brand awareness is often hard to quantify, but it's things like that when you do pick up a phone or send a cold email that increase your likelihood of actually getting through.
I like it. I've also bought something from a cold email. I feel like I'm so impartial.
Me too.
And I will say, Reed has said this to me before when I was talking with my former podcast co-host, Patrick, where sometimes I need a salesperson to like push me a little bit to make the decision that I'm struggling to make. And I know some people may be like, oh, well, that's coercion. No, I needed somebody to give me a little extra confidence to make a big purchase decision. And they were there to kind of guide and consult me when I probably wouldn't have done it if they weren't there. So Reed, let me pass it off to you with this final question. And before I pass it off and you give your answer, I want to highlight something that somebody from the audience said, which is Troy Barter, cold calling is better connect rates, better sales stage progression, and better separation from you compared to the email drones. Thoughts on your former colleague and friend, Troy Barter? Reed?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. I think cold calls, they just allow for a lot more context. An email, you could probably set a meeting for it, but you're not going to have a conversation. Not as easy to get referrals if you're not talking to the right person. So that definitely strikes accurate to me. I know cold calls, they get a bad rap and stuff, and we see them in the movies and they get all played up. I feel like cold calling is to sales as like hot dogs are to baseball. So you may not be a fan of them. You may think they're outdated. You may think they're inhumane. They're beneath us. We've evolved to like brisket nachos and AI generated cold email. You may be into some other diet phase or think other things are better, other forms of outreach. But to me, they're not going anywhere. They're not going to die. They haven't died. They never will. I looked it up actually. Major League Baseball sells 20 million hot dogs a year.
Wonder how
And
that is
like
like
Shane
compared to how
noted,
many cold calls
VPs
happen
of
every year.
sales, VPs of sales, as long as they have cell phone numbers, right? People are going to be cold calling. So, am I telling you to go to a baseball game and just eat a bunch of hot dogs? No, but the numbers don't lie. So, I'd say they're very much alive.
Man, you all make good points. I think that round goes to Reed because I love a good food analogy. We'll move on to our next round, and I will start with around the horn, Florin. Should salespeople prioritize closing deals quickly over building long-term customer relationships?
Yeah, I think this is like an age-old debate for sure. I think so. Funny enough, I think the problem here is actually in the nature of how salespeople are compensated, and I think commission in general kind of creates this short-term urgency where people are like, I have bills to pay, I need to like pay rent or my mortgage, or I have kids I need to take care of. So you're naturally going to go in the direction of not caring too much about that long-term relationship. But I think the reality is that the more detached you are from the outcome, the better your sales are going to be, even in the short term. So it's kind of like a paradox a little bit.
Huh.
So I do think that sales people should prioritize long-term relationships over like the short term, but understanding that a lot of the times it's actually management's fault that they don't do that. So this is not blaming the reps themselves. I think this is more of like an industry and management issue.
Interesting. I want to pull up a post from my good friend Obed Durrani, who is now a full-fledged marketer. So take everything he's about to say with a grain of salt. But he started his career as a sales rep at a content writing company. And I'm going to share my screen. If it doesn't go through for whatever reason, I'll make sure to read it. But we should be able to see it here, and I'll try to just full screen that and zoom in just a smidgen. Started my career as a sales rep at a content writing company. I didn't know anything about content or digital marketing. During the interview, the CEO asked me if I knew what blog posts or product descriptions were. I told him nope. He paused, then asked me why I even showed up to the interview, shrugged and said, I don't know this stuff now, but give me 3 months and I'll be better than any sales rep you have in that room back there. He asked me when I could start. He started the job. Within 2 months, he was doing $40K a month and new closed one. Within 6 months, $70K a month. Within a year, he was training new and existing sales reps on how to close bigger deals. And you want to know how I did it? I never gave a shit about closing a sale. Kind of lines up a little bit with what Florin just said with becoming not so obsessed with the outcome, right? Detached from that outcome. My only game plan was to listen to the person on the other end of the call, understand the challenges they were facing and what they hope to achieve, come up with proper solution, whether those solutions included us or not, and that's it. Actually, sometimes he got yelled at by his manager for listening to prospects for too long. He spent over an hour on a call, or if he spent over an hour on a call, and all I had done was mostly listen so far, you could bet I was going to get yelled at. So I'm going to stop sharing. We don't need to go through the rest of that. I don't want to read to everybody for too long, but I think this kind of nicely lines up. And Florin, do you have any final thoughts before I pass it over to Lindsay on like Obed's post there?
I think I agree. So I'm going to rest my case before I talk too much.
My man, go with the 80-20 listening, talking. I gotcha. All right, Lindsay, what say you on should salespeople prioritize closing deals quickly over building long-term customer relationships?
Again, I think the details are important here of the question. So it's obviously the answer is both. You need to close deals. My preference is that you close deals through relationships you've made, and that it's an ongoing thing, and that you're never in the situation that you're like clamoring to close some deals and to go like scoop some things up off the floor, and that the relationship that you started, the conversation that you were on the phone listening for an hour in January might close in December as a result of a really strong relationship. And you know what? They're going to be that much more likely to probably close at a higher rate, at a bigger deal. And from the CEO seat, they're going to stay. Nothing is more painful than hitting a sales number only to have a really horrible retention rate. That's awful. And so you got to be working the deals that are a good fit, that you have a relationship with. The best way to do that is to be a part of it, be a part of the community, understand the network, understand the people that you're selling to, go to the events, be in on the communities, come to things like this, and really understand what's happening so that you can relate and you understand the motivations, and that you can really appeal to what it is that will not only build the relationship, but in doing so, close the deal. So yeah, you got to close the deals. But my hope is that you do it by building a relationship.
Fair enough. It's a hard question that I helped write here, and kind of a silly question that now that I hear such great answers, so I apologize. But
no, but I've definitely been in situations where it's close deals at all costs, and maybe I didn't reiterate that enough. That like, don't do that. Don't prioritize closing deals over building relationships. That can lead to really bad outcomes for the business long term.
And I think this is probably why I didn't last too long in sales. But I couldn't like try to sell without forming a relationship. I would just be like, oh, this is like, I'm getting vibes that you really don't want to be talked to, or like, you know what? Maybe we should just not talk. I would try to move. And like, I only like, I don't know. I feel like I only sold when I had good mojo with the people. So I was trying to always build relationships. But Reed, should salespeople prioritize closing deals quickly over building long-term customer relationships?
I think it's all about incentives. And not to completely punt the question, but like I agreed with Lauren and Lindsay on it depends on the incentive setup that the company sets up. So if you want people to build long-term relationships, but all your reps are on month-to-month quotas, and if you don't hit for 2 or 3 months, you're getting pipped and then you're out of there. Like obviously that's a recipe for disaster. Likewise, for after someone signs up, they become a customer. What's the relationship with the account executive to that account? Are they just passing it off to an account executive never to be seen again, or to an account manager never to be seen again? Or do they have some kind of relationship, some kind of incentive with expansion revenue, upsells to continue working with them in good faith? So, you can obviously tell if you have super aggressive quotas month after month and you don't get any expansion credit, that's probably going to set up things in a way to where, you're just going to want to close things quick, maybe do things you shouldn't. And so I think it's all about how things are set up from, like Florin mentioned, a management perspective there.
I like that. I don't think you punted the question at all, by the way. I think that was a great consideration.
I could add one more thing here, because I was actually talking to the former CSO at HubSpot, and this specific conversation came up. And at the end of the day, like, it's a really big thorn in a lot of sales leaders' sides, because VC pressure, and this goes back to like management and the board and VC, and that's where all of this short-term thinking comes from. VC pressure for the sales leaders always to hit your number next quarter. But I think the reality is that sometimes you do have to reset as a sales leader and not prioritize the short term. And that is going to lead to the probability that at some point in your career, you probably will get fired. And his answer was that you have to be okay with that, but also that it's easier to say that, especially for people that like don't have a mortgage or like kids that they have to like, put through school and everything like that. Right. So it's a tough thing to balance.
When I was doing sales, it was not in B2B SaaS. So take what I say with a grain of salt, but I think that if we ignore the incentives, if we ignore the true nature of a tech startup that's VC funded, which is like short sight, like a bit like hit your goals, like we're lending you this money and we need to see a return on it. as opposed to where I was selling, which I worked at a university and I was recruiting high school students to come, and we had an endowment. It was just like a different environment. It was like, yeah, we want you to hit your quota, but like build a long-term relationship, because that family could end up changing their mind. The family could, the student could transfer a year later. They could have a younger sibling who maybe is a better fit to come here in 2 years. So it was really about focusing on relationship building. I'm going to give that round to Florin. I like the CSO of HubSpot answer. Let's move on to round 3. Lindsay, this is yours for the taking.
Oh,
I'm going to start with you on this one. Is it ethical for salespeople to use persuasive techniques like time-based incentives, mirroring, persuasion, pattern disrupts in order to influence customer purchasing decisions? Are there any also techniques you've seen that you're not a fan of?
I'm trying to come up with a food analogy so that I can win this round, but instead I'm just gonna jump right in. Anyone who knows me know that I'm all about like human experience, human, and so that's absolutely my answer here. Is who is this for and why are you doing it, right? So going back to our last conversation, which is if you are in the community, if you are in your market and you know your audience and you know who you're selling to and who you're working with, and you know their motivations, you know their challenges, you know the threats to them and their livelihood and their business and their job and their opportunities for promotion. If you know what makes them tick, if you really know your audience, then it's not coercion and it's not being manipulative or trying to get to the short sale. It's saying, okay, how can, like, because I know you, I know that you're really price sensitive. Like we've been working this deal and I know this, my audience, you're really price sensitive. I have an opportunity to help on price. I'll give you this if you give me this, if we can close by the end of the year. To me, that's a deal. That's negotiation. Now, what I don't like is when it's the opposite. And we've all been in situations with salespeople. Sometimes maybe you've been the salespeople where it's like, hey, it's the end of quarter. If you help me out and close now, I can get you a deal. Like that's for you. That's not for me. Like that's not for me as the buyer. And that really bothers me when it's like, hey, if you can really help me out, I can do something really good for you. I can really get you a good deal. It's like,
Smell the desperation.
yeah, and it makes it's very transactional, which is this whole thing we're talking about relationships. And so if you know your audience and you know what really does serve them and what really does make them tick and why you're even having the conversation in the first place, if you can come up with something that is, FOMO, exclusivity, just early access, like that's great. As long as it does serve the buyer, serve the audience.
I love it. And then have you seen a technique you're not a fan of? I know you mentioned like somebody being like, hey, can you help me hit quota? Are there any others that come to mind for you that you're just like, yeah, I was on a call and I just didn't like this?
I think that's what gets to me the most is when it becomes about the sale and the seller, not about, the solution that they're providing and how they're helping the buyer. That really gets under my skin.
It sounds like a few people have talked themselves out of a deal when they were talking to you. Yeah. I bet.
Yeah.
Reed, let's go to you on, is it ethical for salespeople to use persuasive techniques to influence customer purchasing decisions? What do you think?
I mean, do you want us to just sit there? I mean, we have to talk. Once we open our mouths, we're influencing something. Life all around us, right? We're just being constantly bombarded and influenced both positively and negatively. These days, especially, I think the access to information is so all over the place that I think everyone's reading the same books we are, sales books, podcasts. They know all our techniques. But also we get techniqued a lot ourselves and lied to a lot ourselves. I think we can all agree lying, you shouldn't do that. But you're talking with people from procurement or whatever, they're trying to get a good deal. They'll make up a story. To me, it's all in the game. You know what you're signing up for. And so to kind of take umbrage with it, it's like, okay, you can do that, but at the same time, I don't think it's going away. So I would advocate for truthfulness and all of that. But I think ultimately, because it's a tricky situation, because there's such a bad taste in people's mouth with salespeople, they're much more reticent to give up information. So that's where we have to do these like techniques, like mirroring and all these different things you'll read in the books, because we need people to open up. And as salespeople, we don't want to shoot ourselves in the foot. And the best way to do that is to not ask someone a question, or clarify what they mean. So um, I don't really know if I answered the question, so I probably lost the round. But
Is this a technique? Is this a sales technique you're using us right now, Reed?
I think he is. I think we need to get a T-shirt that says "It's on the roadmap" just for you, Reed. So everyone knows that you are just full of it when they're like, "Is that feature coming out yet?" And you're like, "Yeah, it's on the roadmap."
Yeah, exactly.
Florin, what about you? Ethical for salespeople to use persuasive techniques?
So I'm gonna say yes, it is ethical, but I'm gonna use a potentially interesting kind of like analogy here.
Okay.
So it is a bit of an exaggeration as well, because I think as salespeople we're not as important as these people. But saying like, is it ethical? Is almost like saying, is it ethical for a hostage negotiator to use persuasive techniques to like save somebody's lives? Right. Again, we're not as important as hostage negotiators, but at the end of the day,
Speak for
like
yourself.
work, they get results. And I think the key difference here is that as long as you aren't malicious in your intent and you ultimately have your prospect's best interest in mind, then that's okay. I think what a lot of like salespeople do, they get lost in the sauce. So food analogy. So they focus too much on like, oh, I need to do this pattern disruption, or I'm going to use a time-based incentive. And you're not really actually thinking about the prospect or your customer, and that's where we lose sight of things.
I like it.
Yeah, it's, you both have hit on this, but it's not what you say, it's how you say it. It's not what technique you're using, it's how you execute it. So if you're talking with someone and they're completely tone deaf to how fast you can move or how fast your legal moves on an MSA, and they try and TBI you a week before, it's like, come on, like, let's exercise a little bit of social intelligence here, and like, you shouldn't throw that out there. Maybe it should be a tool in your belt, but you shouldn't take it out every single opportunity you get.
I can use a specific example where I actually got called out this week by a prospect where I kind of lost sight, and I was just using a tactic that I heard on LinkedIn. So somebody ghosted me, and on my third email, I just responded to them with a sad face. I got the reply that I was looking for. So maybe this is where we can debate a bit, and it booked the next meeting. But the email specifically said, like, Florin, that really did not sit like well with me. And I knew there that I kind of lost a little bit of like trust and that the brand that I've been building with him. But then the other side is like, wait, we booked the next meeting. So
It's not positive reinforcement.
exactly. So I don't know. It's tough sometimes.
Yeah.
I'm going to give this one to Lindsay, mostly because Shane kind of like summarized in this line what you said in your response, which is buyer problem centric selling is the best, right? When you said earlier, like when it becomes about the seller, and then like in Florin's example, he's like, kind of made it about me when I sent that emoji and less about them. But it worked, unfortunately, in like a good way. But I think, Florin, you're an experienced enough seller where you can build back that trust up if that prospect really has a need for what you're sending. I just got one in my email inbox today. Let me see if I can zoom in where I cannot give away this person's information. I think I should be able to do this. Okay. I'm going to share screen here. If this, I got this one. This was like I haven't responded to this person. So let's see. All right. It says, "Hi, Travis. This is me patiently waiting for a response. Don't want to be a thorn in your side. So is there a better time? Something to be more relevant." I thought this was a nice way to do it, but also I'm just too busy right now. Like, it's the end of the year. Sorry to this person, but good try. In this example of like how to follow up with somebody. All right. Moving on to round 4. Should sales quotas be individual based or team based? Because marketing is team based and it can be frustrating, but also rewarding. And actually, you brought that up, Lindsay. So I'll start with you. We're rehearsing some of these questions and just going over them in the pre meeting for this live stream. Should sales quota be individual based or team based?
Yeah, and I just gotta say I'm really glad that I won the last round because I was trying really hard to think of like a hot dog analogy, and like I'm vegan, and the only thing worse than regular hot dogs is vegan hot dogs, and I was like trying to do something with that. So I'm really glad that I didn't have to do that. I'm gonna kind of like talk out of both sides of my mouth here because marketing teams 9 times out of 10, any way I've ever seen it done, is you're incentivized by a team goal: traffic to the site, leads generated, pipeline created, downloads, things like that. It'd be really difficult to be incentivized as an individual, and that can work really well if the group project is successful. It can also be really frustrating if you're not on a good team. But then you have bigger problems to think about of like, wow, my whole team isn't working together. I do think, though, that even though that was my snarky comment, it's like that's how marketing teams work. Sales is different. You have your own quota, you have your own territory, your own thing that you're working. And I think there is a way to do both. You can have, like, if your whole territory, your whole region, your whole company hits a certain milestone, that you're incentivized on that, and you are compensated on you yourself, because then that takes care of, hey, your territory is underperforming, or the market that you're serving got hit really hard because 2023. You're still, and you care about the greater good. You are incentivized to care about the business and the overall performance of the business. I think that's really important. So there are ways to do both. How's that for like a wish-washy both? It depends.
No, I think you touch on a good point there. I've seen this before. There's a meme swirling around on LinkedIn right now that's like, oh boy, I get to help the shareholders have their stock go up another 2%. I'm going to really work my butt off now. And so I think there's a way that some companies have tried to start adopting, which is like where your actual employees have equity and stake in how well the company does up to a certain percentage, right? Like if we all hit our goals, then we can celebrate in that way, but we also have individual goals as well. I think that's a great way to approach it, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that answer. Before we move on to Reed, who I'm going to have a follow up, I have to show this comment, which is like Lisa Reina says, once or twice a year, all you need is a good hot dog. Thanks, Bethany, for reminding us about that. And we're going to just keep going with the hot dog analogies. Mr. Reed Anderson, what do you think on this? Should sales quotas be individual based or team based? I think I already know your answer, but I can't wait to hear you explain it.
It's not about corn dogs.
Fair enough.
So this would be a super cool experiment to do. If companies are already doing it, I don't know. I'd be very interested to see what the results were. I feel like if you just did a blanket mandate that it had to be team-based, or that people actually at least had to experiment with it, I think what would end up happening most likely is that the top performers would end up quitting and then rehiring as independent contractors. And basically you would just get the status quo again. That's just a theory. But yeah, it's the whole, we've all worked on group projects back in high school, and someone usually takes the lead. Some people do less work, and then, one guy will just be sitting there and he has no idea what what the topic was. So yeah, you'd have to control for that. I guess you'd have to hire. That would be the fix. To hire, you have to be very scrupulous with your hires and make sure you had good culture and good traits, characteristics with all your sales hires. So I'm going to say no, they should be individual based, but if you want to test it out, like, prove me wrong.
Cool. Florin, the floor is yours, my man.
Okay, so I agree, but let's keep it a bit more spicy here. And I think I've had this conversation with a few different people, but it's not even just that marketing is team-based. When you think about any other department in a company, nobody actually has an individual based quota or commission. And a perfect example of this too, in engineering, you've probably heard of the 10x engineer. So my argument would be too that the top people are going to end up leaving if that's the case. But how come the 10x engineer that's like doing 80% of the work doesn't end up leaving? So maybe actually going to team-based like incentives and managing to performance as opposed to having like quotas and commission might actually be the answer. But it's going to require like a reframe in the whole industry, right? Like we're already conditioned to believe that salespeople would leave if they did not receive commission.
I'm trying to think of like an SDR that's like, cool, I only get my bonus based on my output. I'm going to get an auto dialer and I'm going to dial more calls than anybody else. And I don't have to worry about if those actually get booked. And then I'm like, you're such a jerk. You just ruined this for everyone.
So there's always one.
I know. Always one that's going to break the system that we're trying to make it more equitable for everybody. We're going to have to go into a final round because I'm going to give a 3-way tie to that one. So now we're all tied at 1 apiece here, or at 2 apiece, if you will. But this last question, to wrap up our awesome live stream, the Sales Showdown Debate of the Ages, brought to you by PandaDog. Is it fair to hold salespeople accountable for factors outside of their control, such as market conditions or product quality? Is it fair? I mean, it's happening. We are holding them, accountable for factors outside of their control because we're seeing these layoffs happen. So, is it fair? I'll start, Reed, with you.
Oh boy, the F word. I didn't know we were allowed to say that. I think it's fair because market conditions. If you're a company, a business, and you want to attract better people or more employees, you can do whatever you want there. But from like a product quality or market fit, those kinds of things, that's on you as a salesperson to vet out when you're interviewing at the company, when basically you're a buyer. So, right, you're going to be a seller, but you're a buyer when you're interviewing. So I think that's on you to vet everything out. There's so much darn software out there right now that it's hard, but that means all the more that you should be very, very diligent with your research and making sure, their customer base, the fit, who you're going to be selling to, all those kinds of things. You don't want to go into that blind because, especially in this economy, if you're a nice to have tool, yeah, it's going to be rough.
Interesting answer. The F word. Florin, I'll have you go next. Do you think it's fair to hold salespeople accountable for factors outside of their control?
So I'm going to give a hot take here and say that salespeople in general, I think, are huge complainers, and we, including myself, are definitely entitled. So you can technically argue that, no, it's not fair, but then I want to make sure that everyone has the same energy when we think about the other side. So when the market was hot in 2020 and 2021, and I saw people at 300, 400% quotas making 400, 500K, no one was complaining that it wasn't fair then, right? Ooh. So I think at the end of the day, like, there's ups and downs in the market. That's why salespeople in general get paid pretty well. And I think a lot of us in the sales industry are actually detached from the real world. Like, even our base salaries are higher than a lot of full salaries for employees in other roles. And that's just the nature of being in sales. And if you don't like it, then get out.
Ooh, spicy. Florin came in. Ooh, coming off a cold or an illness last week and just coming in hot. So, Lindsay, where are you on is it fair to hold salespeople accountable after hearing Florin just kind of wipe the floor with his own kind?
I don't know. Yeah, Reed and Florin had all the kind of hot takes for me. I think it's the self-awareness among all of us, because I was actually going to kind of be softer than that. But I agree. First of all, I agree with both. I think my take, if you had started with me, is this comes down to communication, both sides. So one of the things that Florin started to get to is as a sales rep, as anyone being interviewed also has the responsibility of interviewing, right? Asking the tough questions, getting into what does this mean? What are we selling? Why? Product market fit. What is the value? What are the challenges? I mean, like, you're interviewing, you are being sold to just as much as you are trying to be the seller. Now, the responsibility on behalf of the CEO and the leadership team and the hiring manager is to be clear and to be honest and to say, these are the challenges that we're in. Like, if you're struggling, don't tell the sales rep, it is so easy. The biggest problem we have is pipeline that we can't convert because we just don't have, like, we don't have the bandwidth. Like, don't say that if it's not true. Say, like, here's the thing that we're struggling to articulate our value. We're struggling to, with pricing. Like, be honest, because then that individual has the chance to say, this is for me. This is my sweet spot, and I can absolutely overcome these challenges. And then once you agree, yeah, it's on you to see it through and to meet the company where they're at with what they're asking you to do. And if it's not fair, say it going into it, before you agree to what you're up against.
I like it. It almost feels too like there's a part of it that's like going back to what Reed said about, like, hey, you had to do your due diligence when you were looking for a company to go work at. And if you didn't feel like there was great product market fit on that, then you took a job out of desperation, or you didn't do it. So I use the F word on you. It's fair. It's your fault. The other F word. I get to be CEO of this sales showdown debate of the ages. And I'm going to be unfair to all of you. You're all winners. There's no winner here. You're all great people. Reed had the best food analogy. Florin, you had the spiciest take. And Lindsay, I really loved your answer about individual-based quotas and team-based quotas, and being able to do both of them. I think that's a really neat idea to give a shot towards. So you're all winners in my book. I want you guys to give Reed, Florin, and Lindsay a follow. Thank you all three for joining me on a week where you are probably exhausted. You are ready to go celebrate the holidays. We at PandaDoc appreciate you. If there's anything I can ever do for the three of you, please let me know. And thank you again, everybody, for showing up.
Thank you so much. This is fun.
Yeah.
All right, everybody.
Thanks, Travis. Thanks, all.
Thank you for joining us, and I hope everybody enjoys a good holiday. Shane, shout out to you for giving the most comments and blowing up our chat. I love seeing the energy, and goodbye, everyone.